Good afternoon and welcome back to Tactics Board. Today we're previewing another huge game for Norwich City, this time against Sunderland at Carrow Road. It kicks off on Sunday at 12, so a little bit later than usual, but certainly one that the Norwich City crowd and the home crowd at Carrow Road will be right up for. David Wagner has asked the fans to be as loud as possible, and he clearly doesn't think that the playoff goal is done just because they've reached the top six with that win over Millwall last week. But it's certainly one where his team selection is going to be interesting, because I thought he made some tactical tweaks that worked very appropriately against Millwall that might not be so applicable here. But when you play so well and get such an impressive result, it's quite difficult to drop any of the players that played key roles in that Millwall game. So this is the team that I think David Wagner will select. I've gone with Angus Gunn in goal, Max Aarons at right back, Grant Hanley and Ben Gibson at centre back, Dimitris Nunes at left back, Kenny McLean, Jacob Sørensen, and Gabriel Sara in midfield three, with Marquinhos on the right, Onel Hernandez on the left, and Tamer Pukki through the middle for Norwich. Now, I think most of that selection speaks for itself, really. The back five aren't really going to be changed, despite the fact that Gibson and Hanley had a little bit of a mix-up for that first Millwall goal, and probably the second one wasn't ideal either in terms of how they dealt with the corner. It was a free header for Zion Fleming in the end, which isn't what you want. But I think Gibson and Hanley, since the former has come back into the team, have been really impressive. And Dimitris Nunes and Max Aarons, despite probably a legitimate question from some fans a few weeks ago as to whether Nunes should be in the team ahead of Sam McCallum, I think since then he's stepped up and he's really improved his performance and done well over the last few games. I wasn't especially pleased with him at Millwall, but I can see why David Wagner wants him as part of the team. And as somebody who values attacking fullbacks so highly, it's no surprise to see the Greek consistently selected by Wagner. In the midfield is where it probably gets slightly more interesting, and we're going to come on to this in detail later on in the programme. But I think the fact that Jacob Sorensen came in for that Millwall game probably marked the fact that Wagner knew they were coming up against perhaps a more physical, more direct side, and also one that's produced consistently good results this season. He was also going away to a difficult ground, and it was going to be a lot more pressure for Norwich to deal with through the middle of the pitch. So I think that's why he went with Sorensen over Nunes for that game, despite Nunes obviously having been so impressive in the last couple of weeks. And the dilemma for Wagner this week comes in whether Nunes returns to the team over Sorensen, who actually was really impressive. So it's quite difficult to drop him. But you might argue that tactically, at home against Sunderland, you're likelier to need your creative players on the pitch and trying to break that Sunderland team down. So it'll be very interesting to see what Wagner goes for. I've gone based purely off momentum and the fact that he'll want to carry that on with the same three, but I wouldn't be surprised at all to see Nunes starting. And then with the front three, I think probably the only real surprise that anyone will have from the team I've selected is Marquinhos over Adamida, who I don't think has been especially impressive, particularly not in a wide role. His touch hasn't been perhaps good enough to get him into the positions that you'd like to see against the teams like Millwall. And he does have that power and that athleticism that allows him to take defenders on, but without space to run into, I wonder if his touch is really good enough. And on the Carrow Road pitch, which is small, against a Sunderland team who will look to condense it as much as physically possible, I think either could struggle. So I've said that Wagner might go for somebody else, a different option. I've gone for Marquinhos because he seems to have been a preferred option by Wagner. But equally, you could have Hernandez playing on the right, as he did in South East London, and perhaps even Christos Jolis coming off the left. I equally wouldn't be surprised to see Adamida start, but just as I said, I don't think he's been especially impressive in the last few weeks, and perhaps if it was up to me, I might drop him, and I've predicted that David Wagner is going to do the same. Now, I said we would look at the midfield, and we're going to talk about what Jacob Sørensen offers the team a little bit more. Of course, he does offer a little bit more stability. He's a slightly more defensive midfielder than Marcelino Nunes or some of the other options available, but he also helps out in possession, and this is where I think he can. So this was an example of how things looked a lot of the time against Millwall. where you had sort of McLean dropping into a back three as he has since Wagner's arrival, and everybody's praised his role or his performance in that role, and I think it suits him very well. And then you had Sorensen acting as the perfect link to both those fullbacks and to Gabriel Sara, who likes to play further forward. I think that made a big change. I think Sorensen's movement in front of that back three in possession really helped Norwich progress the ball up the pitch. And I was actually really impressed with how much higher the tempo felt when Sorensen was on the ball and how much he controlled that. So he certainly does offer a great deal from that perspective. And I can see why Wagner would like to have that just for possession. And I think I wanted to highlight that because a lot of people will look at Sørensen and they'll think that he's only in the team for his defensive attributes, for the fact that he's maybe played in a slightly deeper role throughout his career. And of course, that helped Norwich against Millwall. But for me, the main missing link under Wagner has been that discrepancy between where McLean likes to play and where Sara likes to play, which is quite large in possession. And sometimes I feel that it's been difficult for Norwich to find players like Sara or Nunez in those pockets in advanced areas of the pitch. And this is a diagram of how it sometimes works out without that middleman like Jakob Sørensen to link McLean or the back three with the likes of Sara, Nunez and Aarons. And this is probably how Sunderland will press if they go with a two up front, as they have quite often this season, and a number 10, then that could certainly have an impact on Norwich. And you can see from this diagram with Sara and Nunez, who both like to play in advanced areas, it's difficult for McLean to find those angles into those two front players. Of course, if he had Sorensen in between those three, not only able to take the ball and perhaps turn if he finds some space, but also to move those players around and perhaps create the passing lines for McLean to find the likes of Nunez and Sara, then it does make the advancement of possession quite a lot easier. But then we're back to the old personnel versus tactics debate, because as I said earlier, Marcelino Nunez scored an absolute cracker of a goal against Birmingham for Norwich and has impressed since then. So he's clearly a player with confidence, and you have to balance picking the best 11 players with picking the players that are most suited to the system. And I think perhaps Sorensen does suit the system more and he does help them more in that sense. But you look at who's going to provide a moment of quality, who's going to unlock the Sunderland defence if it's a close game, which I think most people would expect it to be. And you probably do feel like Nunez is more likely to do that. So certainly an interesting choice for David Wagner to make ahead of this weekend's game, but probably one that he's happy to have. And I think most managers would like that choice, especially with the quality of the players involved. So yeah, looking forward to seeing what David Wagner does with that. As I am the whole of the game, of course, we'll have it covered across Pinken channels. And if you've not subscribed to the Pinken Plus app, of course, I recommend it. A 30-day free trial, so you can consume a whole month's worth of content. And if you don't like it, you can unsubscribe free of charge. But for just £2 a month or $1.99, even better, you can get all that content for every month, which of course I'd recommend. This weekend it's going to be Team News Live, David Wagner's press conference. That's all on our YouTube channel. There'll be Paddy's pointers for Pinken Plus subscribers after the game, and yeah, just plenty of the content you need around the match cycle for Norwich City. So keep it locked to Pinken channels. Let's hope Norwich can pull off another exciting win and continue their playoff push.